Welcome to a realm where personal growth meets expansive spirituality and where we're not just scratching the surface, we're diving deep, widening our perspectives and having a darn good time doing it. This is the Enlightened Podcast and I am your host, Jen Hamilton. You'll enjoy an infusion of motivation, empowerment and inspiration that will resonate in every aspect of your life. Expect captivating stories, heartfelt musings, and my own personal experiences. But that's not all. I'm bringing awe-inspiring individuals to the table, so get ready to meet some remarkable souls whose wisdom and stories will leave you spellbound. No topic is off limits here. Brace yourself for raw authenticity, unfiltered vulnerability, and yes, the occasional splash of explicit language. We're delving into the realms of the esoteric, mystical, and the woo-woo, unafraid to explore the extraordinary. So if you are ready to venture beyond the surface, to explore the depths of your soul, and to awaken the magic of life, if your heart says yes, then hit that play button and let the Enlightened Podcast guide you on this remarkable expedition. Hello and welcome to this episode of the Enlightened Podcast. I am your host, Jen, and today my guest is a beautiful soul sister and friend of mine, Deanna Carbone. So Deanna is a professional cabaret performer, radio show host, and company director of Voicehouse, which she founded back in 2008 and is now one of Australia's largest vocal studios, teaching adults how to sing. She started performing in front of audiences at just 4 years old, and after studying singing, dancing, acting, and piano for most of her earlier years, Deanna undertook studies at Adelaide University's prestigious Elder Conservatorium of Music. Her professional career started in children's entertainment, where she got her first big break at the age of 20 as Poppi the Pop Princess in iconic Adelaide's children's group, the Funkees. The group toured all around South Australia and performed with big names such as Jessica Mauboy for crowds of up to 35,000 people. More recently, Deanna is known for her part in the hit trio Two Brunettes And A Gay with Collis and Celeste Scala. The group has been fortunate enough to have totaled 8 consecutive seasons on stage, including Adelaide and Fringe and the other Australian festivals, and is now taking on the media with their very own live radio show and podcast, Two Brunettes And A Gay, currently broadcast statewide via Radio Italia Uno, as well as internationally via the Ozcast network in 2023. Deanna is also a passionate animal rights activist and former essay coordinator for Anonymous for the Voiceless and deputy convener for the Animal Justice Party. Having run in both a federal and state election, she speaks frequently on the subject in many podcasts and keynotes. In this episode, we dive into all things business and having integrity around building a brand, as well as the intersection of business and spirituality. Plus, we also journey into conversation around veganism. We break down some of the stigmas and a lot of the questions that people have around veganism, plus so much more. It is an absolutely incredible conversation. I know you're going to love it. So without further ado, let's dive in. Hello and welcome to the Enlightened Podcast. I'm Jen and I have got the beautiful Deanna Carbone with me today, who is a beautiful soul sister of mine. We've known each other for a couple of years and we are so excited because we're just going to dive into a few different topics that we're both very passionate about in this world. So over to you, Deanna. Tell us a little bit about who you are and who is Deanna?
That's a big question. Who is Deanna? My name is Deanna. In terms of what I do, well, originally I started off very young as a performer, and I became a professional performer in my teenage years. I started out in children's entertainment, and then later on I moved into adult cabaret as well. A few years later, at 20 years old, I started my own business, which is a brick and mortar business based in South Australia. And it was originally a singing, dancing, acting studio for kids. We used to do children's birthday parties. And then it got to a point in time where I decided to niche down and focus just on the vocals because singing was my first passion, even though I love all of them. And so we became one of Australia's largest singing studios focused on working with adults. And we typically work with people who have always wanted to sing but never had the time or opportunity to do so, which I'm sure is a lot of people listening to this right now, as I always get told. And so we turned 15 3 weeks ago, just clocked over our 15th birthday. I am also a radio host as well. I'm live every week on Radio Italia Uno in Adelaide with my trio, Two Brunettes and a Gay. I am blonde now. That's a whole nother story, but our brand is still Two Brunettes and a Gay because we were together in cabaret for a decade before doing the radio show. And we also have an international podcast under the same name as well. So that's me.
That's exciting. That's amazing. One of the things I love about Deanna's journey is, as she mentioned, she's had her vocal studio for 15 years now. Yeah. And so she is an absolute gun at business. And we've spoken about this a lot, her and I, because there's a lot of spiritual fluff that comes into business, especially in my view of the world as a coach, as a hypnotherapist, as someone that's sort of, I hate the term, but it's kind of new agey way of thinking, the way of doing business where we bring energetics into it. And that's one of the topics that I wanted to dive into today, because we see it so much in especially business coaches that perhaps might not actually be qualified for business coaching. And you and I have had some big chats about this, because you're a Taurus, so you're the bull, you're very headstrong, you understand business on all levels because you have been there, done that, got the fridge magnet for so long. Yeah. What are we missing in the world right now when it comes to being spiritual humans? Because you and I are both very, very spiritual people in our own way. Yet when we see spirituality blending with business, we're seeing a whole lot of fluff, as you call it. Yes. Tell us about that. What does that look like from your view of the world?
I may have some controversial opinions on this stuff, so I'll put that.
Let's go.
Also, with the Taurus thing, I'm a Sagittarius ascendant as well.
Yeah, of course.
Very fiery when it comes to things. But okay, so spirituality and business, where are we missing the connection? I actually think it's really simple. They're not one and the same, right? Mm-hmm. Spirituality is who you are as a person, and you work on yourself and who it is that you are here to be. Who it is that you want to show up as in this world, if you feel so called to do, who it is that you know that you were meant to be in this world, if you feel like you have an underlying mission or a purpose. Too many people are trying to make their business that thing exactly. And sometimes they're not one and the same. Singing is a big part of my life. Sharing, empowering people to sing is such a gift, because singing is such a vulnerable thing. If you've never sung in front of someone before and you've always wanted to, it's kind of like getting naked in front of someone for the first time. Like, it's very exposing. But just because it's a wonderful thing to do, it doesn't encompass all of my purpose or my passions. And I got caught up in the same loop early on, because to begin with, business was black and white to me. I came from a family, they were in business, and I was very successful very, very early on, and then there was company structures and trusts put in place, and I was all like, I don't know what this is. I was only 22 at the time. It was a couple of years into the business, and then I decided to go and explore the spiritual side of things. Well, personal development is where it started. I think it starts there for pretty much everybody. And then there came this new wave of business, spiritual, all being one and the same. And of course, there are elements of it that it's one and the same. But when you're working on your purpose, you're working on you as a person, sometimes you have to separate that from the business, because the business is there to serve others. Of course, it needs to have reciprocity and serve you at the same time. But it's really hard to describe the fact that there still needs to be that practical separation in what you do as well. Because if you make every decision just based on how you feel on the day, there's no consistency. And unfortunately, when it comes to creating a brand, customers need consistency for certainty, for trust. If you don't have trust in your brand, you don't have a business. There you go.
I love that. I love how passionate you get about this too.
Thank you.
Because you and I both been in the personal development space for quite some time.
Yes.
We know a lot of the same people.
Uh-huh.
We've trained under some of the same people. We've
Yes.
been given advice from a lot of the same people. And it's almost like we've both had to go through a deconditioning process
Yes.
as well. And Deanna and I speak about this very regularly because it's like the personal development industry, especially in Queensland, I feel, not naming the Gold Coast, but but what we have both found is just the almost like the mass hypnosis of like it's like someone got a concept and taught it, and then everyone else took that as gospel and went from there. And I'm going to say it, I feel like the personal development space is a little bit incestuous as well, with like the same shit being recycled. People not given the opportunity to think for themselves because they're putting people on pedestals, looking up to them instead of checking in with themselves to be like, actually, what is it I want? Or hiring a coach that's actually going to teach them strategy. Like, yes, there's energetics behind it. Yes, there's spirituality and there's personality. There's all these different aspects to it. Strategy is such a big one. And I've even worked with coaches before. I'm like, this is not strategy. How are you going to show me how to launch my business, scale my business from a strategy perspective, not just love and light and how I feel?
The practical implementation of the actual work is just as important as the energetics of your money blocks, blah, 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 blah. Like, and I'm not saying that to be dismissive. I'm just saying it because sometimes I think I get asked a lot how I've had a business for 15 years that is successful. You know, I have like 5 full-time employees in my business. I, was able to live in the Gold Coast for a couple of years myself, even though my brick and mortar is in Adelaide, because I have the flexibility to do so. Right now, I don't have to work in my business. I can work on my business if I want to go through a growth spurt. If I choose not to, literally, we make the same money every month and it's not an issue. Touch wood, very blessed. But what it took to get to that point was not just working on finding the right thing or letting it come through or working on the money block and waiting and this. It was a lot of just trial and error of the practical things. It was not being afraid to commit to something for fear of being stuck in it, because I think that's what I see with a lot of my friends who have been in the same circuit, but not actually, who've had more of a flexible home-based business. See, I always had the commitment there because I had a brick and mortar, I had rent to pay, I have staff to pay. So I had to show up and I had to figure it out, right? It's very easy if you're not self-disciplined. And look, I am a very self-disciplined person as well. And that's a huge part of success in business. If you're not self-disciplined and you work from home, it's really easy to just keep putting it off and putting it off and putting it off. But what I learned from singing, which was training a high-level skill, I studied singing for 27 years of my life, not 5 years, not 2 years, 27. Right? And what I learned from training a high level skill is that everything is a compounding effect, but it comes in very small doses. And it's in the parts where you show up, even though you don't want to, and you feel like you're getting nowhere, that actually the progress is made. You just won't see it unless you look back 6 months later or 12 months later or 2 months later. In retrospection is when you see it. Having that level of trust and commitment rather than just changing every time you feel like there's no traction. It's an art of discernment that can only be learnt by experiencing it and going through it, rather than trying to get it right before you even start. If somebody had the magic formula to let it all drop in and then just let it flow, then somebody would be making a bucket load of money right now. But that doesn't exist for a reason. It's because as humans, if we need to learn more about ourselves and who we be in this world, we have to do things in order to have those experiences.
It's so true. And I've had I've had my company for nearly 8 years.
Wow.
Nearly 8 years. And I didn't come from a background of family having business.
Yes.
And it was very much frowned upon. It was like business is unsafe, business is unsustainable. What my parents' view of the world is that business is unsafe because they knew people that had lost businesses and then coded that as that's not okay. It was always taught or indoctrinated that, you know, you work to 65, you get your pension, you get your 4 weeks annual leave, your tax is taken care of, you all of the moving parts, and you will be happy. Whereas, you know, I've come to break the rules in every possible aspect in this lifetime that I can. And then having to unravel all of those belief systems that were passed on from my family to then decide, well, hang on a second, this doesn't have to be my experience. This doesn't have to be my truth. I can change this. And what I didn't realize is, first of all, the work I had to do on myself around it. But then also just how volatile business can be. Not only that, but as a coach and hypnotherapist working alone, I didn't realize I had to be so in my business as well. I'm the marketing manager, I'm the bookkeeper, I'm playing all roles, and just how much of a lonely journey that's been as well. Because it's just something like I know, you know, some people get together with other people and perhaps do a coaching business together. I've worked in a coaching firm before and I thrived because of that team environment. But what I found is that because I work from home, because after COVID, I had to take everything online, which was a blessing and a blessing in disguise, and it was a curse because I used to see people in person, so I was interacting with other people. I used to rent a room at a wellness clinic, so I saw everyone there. But I was very limited to the clientele that I could have. And then when COVID hit and I could take everything online, it was like, oh my gosh, I'm now seeing people in America, in Sweden, in the UK, in New Zealand. Like I had clients everywhere, but I was at home. I was alone. I was doing everything, and I didn't have the drive or, you know, the people around me to keep me accountable as well, which I struggled with. And then there was times like I was having ridiculously big months and then it would plummet, and then you would go back, you'd be like, what have I done wrong? What did I do right? And no one really explained to me that the business is not necessarily growth on growth on growth every year.
No, not necessarily. Like, I mean, firstly, like when it comes to, you know, the things that you experienced working on your own, obviously, that's just a personality type thing, right? As an entrepreneur, it's up to everybody to figure out what works for them. Like I can work by myself for days and weeks at a time and I am good. Nobody is going to challenge me or keep me more accountable than me. Right. Again, I started training a discipline. Like I started dancing at 4 years old. I started I started piano at 5 years old. I started vocals at 8 years old. And I never stopped. I never took a break from any of those things, not through primary school, not through high school, and certainly not after I finished university because I went straight into business for myself. So I'm used to showing up in the shit parts where you don't like it and you don't want to do it anymore. So I guess I just keep working through those and expect that there are going to be periods like that, right? So I've had, you know, that experience. But yes, the thing is that I think it took me 10 years, honestly, of my business to realize the cycles and to stop panicking about them.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
You've got to be consistent. When it slows down, you don't change something. If it's gone on a slow trajectory over 12 months, then you change something. But if it goes down for 3 months, I wouldn't change it just yet. I'd keep an eye on it, right? You got to wait until you're at a point where you really like, because if it spikes back up again and things like that, you might go, okay, you know what? Maybe there's just minor tweaks that need to be made rather than changing. I hear of these people firing all their clients and starting again. And it's like, why just destroy everything that you've built when you can pivot? You know, there are so many ways that you can pivot. I remember the first time I did do some business coaching, and one of the great takeaways was obviously understanding that I was undercharging, you know, at the time. And the thing is that undercharging was the best thing that I ever did because I built up a massive client base, right? I didn't fire all those cheap clients and start again. I literally put it out and I was like, your rates are going up by $100 an hour if you want to stay. I had, I think, 130 people on that list at the time, I had 2 not come back.
Wow.
Right? So it's just about what you offer, what you sell, and the way that you do it. Like, everybody's too quick to throw the baby out with the bathwater, and it's in business, it's so delicate. You don't change anything really, really quick, right? You slowly and incrementally make adjustments so that you can measure and track what adjustments made it better and what adjustments made it worse, because it's the smallest thing, the smallest imaging, the smallest change in language, the smallest change in the energy that can make a difference in business. There is nothing big. The difference between someone who's good in business and great in business is attention to detail. People need to be more detail focused, and they need to focus on one detail at a time rather than changing everything and then not knowing what works and what doesn't.
Yeah, because then you've got nothing to gauge off as well if you're constantly just starting from scratch. And I've done that myself before, not completely from scratch. Like, I've still always had a very similar underlying message. But for me, it's always been about instant gratification. What can I sell the quickest? How can I get the most clients quickly? Because I feel like we're living in such a fast-paced world as well, that everything feels like it's sped up. And then we've got our constant comparison game to other people that we're modeling our experience off as well, not knowing their background history of business as well. Like, this is some of the stuff that we have to talk about. And this is some of the stuff that, if I work with a coach, I want them to be so wildly transparent about, first of all, what they're working through in themselves. And I want to hear about, failures that they've had or redirections that they've had, because I don't want to be coached by someone that hasn't been there, done that, got the fridge magnet and the tea towel,
It's very true, but it's the same as, when obviously being a vocal coach and hiring other vocal coaches and things. And again, getting back to what you said before, I started out as the admin person, the coach, the floor cleaner, you name it. Like, every job, marketing, from the beginning, it was me. And even though I had to have some other team members to teach classes, because classes usually ran simultaneously at different rooms, so I couldn't coach them all at once because we did group classes to begin with. In terms of everything else, in terms of running the business, always from day dot, that was me. Now, just because I think it's useful, this whole hustle culture thing versus just having flow and balance in the life, I think there needs to be really important distinctions. There are seasons for both. Not one nor the other is the way to go. There are seasons for both. In the beginning season of my business, we used to teach classes only on a couple of nights a week to begin with. Let's say it was 3 nights a week to begin with, right? And we would teach from 4 after school, because we primarily worked with kids back in the day, until about 9 o'clock at night. To begin with, it was even less than that. I used to go in sometimes for just 1 or 2 classes on a night because we just needed enough to get started. Now, because I didn't start teaching until 4 a.m., do you know when I got into the doors on a daily basis to work, even though I had nothing necessarily to do, but I knew that if I showed up and I'd find something to do, I'd make progress? 8 or 9 a.m. every morning. And I'd be there until 9 p.m., if not 10 p.m. every single night. From 9 a.m. in the morning until 3, 4 o'clock in the afternoon, I would sit there and Google. And we're talking 15 years ago, where, like, websites, I had a $7 a month website on Vistaprint, but I was the first business of my kind to have one. How we launched our business was a leaflet drop. We did 5,000 flyers in the suburb that we were in, which I think cost me a few grand at the time. And out of that leaflet drop, I think we got about 13 customers back. And that's how we started our business. And even though I had overheads, we only made like $1,300 in the first quarter, not month, quarter, to begin with. But I showed up and I got on Google and I went, how can people find my business? I used to visualize just the phone ringing all the time. I used to think about, just wait for that phone to ring. And then I used to think, I don't want to be the best kept secret. And so I started searching and I found all these things that I started pursuing and learning about to become good at marketing, so that people could find out about who we were, because word of mouth isn't enough if you want to grow something at a level where you earn good money and it's consistent, right? obviously there are exceptions to that rule. It depends on what kind of business you are learning. But to begin with, I think a lot of people underestimate the amount of exposure they need. If you, out of 5,000 flyers, you get 13 back, that's actually a really high return on investment. So you got to get out there. You've really got to be passionate about putting yourself in front of people every day. If a portion of your day isn't spent on exposure, even 15 years later, I'm still doing that, right? Now I'm fortunate enough that we rank 1 on Google in all of our categories. I got the business to the point where I could afford to put on, great people to do SEO for the website. Mind you, I learned all of it myself. I can even code websites at this point in time to begin with. But then I could put on somebody else who was much better at it than I was, who built upon the work that I had already been doing for a decade. Now we rank 1, and I can't switch the customers off if I try. Like, there's nothing I can do. We always get people through the door, and we haven't done paid advertising for 3 years now, and we still have between 7 and 12 new customers coming our doors a week, right? But that started 15 years ago, and it never stopped. It was consistent, and I just want to make that really clear for anybody who thinks that nobody's coming to me, I'm not getting any clients, I need to change something. Maybe just start with realizing the amount that you need to put out there for it to build.
It's so true, isn't it? And it's that consistency. I want to circle back to marketing.
Yes.
Because you and I have had a lot of chats about marketing.
Yeah.
And one of the things that you pulled me up on when we were chatting about it, probably about it, I don't know, 2 years ago or something, you're like, I don't even know what the fuck you do. You're like, your messaging is so fluffy. Tell me, as if I'm the dumbest person in the world, what the fuck you do. And that was a game changer for me, because I was like, off with the fairies, esoteric, energetic, trying to sound as fucking cool as I could. I knew what I was on about. I knew what my delivery was going to be. And Captain Black and White Deanna comes in and she's like, I don't fucking even know what you do. Tell me what you do. Yeah. Which I love. So can you speak into that? What do you...
Oh, gosh. Like some of you, with all due respect and like blessed, because, like, it's good to be creative and it's fine to express ourselves. But some of you still sound like you're naming your businesses like you did when you had your hotmail.com.
What was your Hotmail account?
Chris Egan's Girl.
Oh my God.
From Home and Away.
Oh my God, no.
I love Chris Egan on Home and Away, right?
Mine was Jen_babe50.
Oh, that's nice.
My sister was like, yeah, put babe in there. I was like, oh yeah, I'm going to put babe. This is also the same issue that I have. I got my phone number, my first mobile phone and my phone number when I was 14. I remember I was at Optus going through the SIM card packets to look for a number that ended in 69 because it was cool. No. I have the same phone number, and I say every time I say it out loud now, I'm like, great life choices, Jen. Great life choices. Ending a phone number in 69. And like, people get a laugh out of it, but I'm like, I did not think ahead for the future. I mean, if that's not a sign to think ahead for your future, I don't know what is.
Oh God, that's fantastic. I love that. What was the question again?
It was around fluffy names.
Oh, fluffy names.
Fluffy names, fluffy titles, fluffy marketing. Like, in Deanna's words, what the fuck do you even do?
Right. So, in order for people to find you, you need to understand search psychology, which is essentially SEO. And if you don't know what SEO is, it's search engine optimization, right? Now, there's a lot of things that go into that from a technical perspective, but there's also things that go in it from copywriting. Copywriting and language and messaging is one of the biggest parts of having good SEO. Now, SEO is no longer just restricted to Google. It's YouTube, it's Instagram. Instagram is now ranking posts and videos based on the SEO. Your podcasts, they have metadata, the language and the titles that you put in, that's all SEO. That's information that the algorithms of all the platforms use to gather, I guess, a picture of what you do. They create a picture of what you do, and then based on other people's interests, they serve it to those people. Now, it's not often that a social media platform is going to be able to gather enough data about someone to say, oh, this person's into esoteric life coaches, because it's not a thing, right? It's not a real thing. It needs to be in layman's terms, so to speak, so that they can go, okay, this person might be interested in spirituality. It's a very broad term, but they're not going to be able to narrow it down to, I guess, particular facets of spirituality, right? Even if you're someone who's into plant medicine or, Buddhism or whatever the case is, it kind of gets encompassed in one. And so you've got to speak to the lowest common denominator. The whole premise of being a good copywriter is not sounding like you would on an academic paper that you were submitting in university for a thesis. The whole idea behind copywriting is making language very simple and easy to understand, because people skim read. They need to be able to get exactly what you do and who you are in the first sentence, right? And a lot of people do not have secondary and even tertiary education. It doesn't mean that they're not necessarily good customers for what you do, but everybody needs to be able to understand. It's very, very clear. In terms of search content or even content, you have about 0.3 of a second, I think the last time I read the statistic it was, to grab somebody's attention. When you start with words that only you and the people in your communities understand in those posts, you're marketing to only the same very tiny pool of people. You want to widen the funnel, make the funnel more understandable for everybody. That's really the most important thing when it comes to messaging and marketing.
And on that, is it about niching so that you can capture perhaps a small audience, but more of an engaged audience because you're speaking directly to someone, or start broad and basically throw shit at a wall and see what sticks?
Look, if you honestly have no idea, you start broad and you throw shit at the wall.
Yeah.
Right? But if you're like, oh, but I'm multi-passionate entrepreneur and I want to do everything, you can, but not all at once. Right? Pick one. Pick the thing that you are the best at, not the thing you like the most. I'm sorry if you don't like to hear that. Pick the thing that you are best at, that you know better than anybody else, and that you can offer the most value in with exceptional confidence, because you have oodles and oodles of content to be able to create on that topic, and start with that for at least 2 years. Get good at the format. What you're creating is a system and a structure that you can then copy and paste for new topics, new products, new brands, whatever it is. You are creating a framework at the same time. I would I have so many things that I'm like, I could talk on so many things these days after having so many years of experience doing what I'm doing, right? But the point is that until I feel I'm at a point of mastery in what I know in my personal knowledge about the other stuff that I'm still really good at and really passionate about, I will stick with talking about singing, because I know that I'm exceptional at that, right? And then when it's time to make the switch, it'll drop in. I'll know when it's time to drop in. I'm not in a rush, because business for me isn't like, oh, I just want to change now. I'll think about in a year's time, you could have already started. That's rubbish. That's from someone who's trying to sell you a dream, right? Just do what you're good at and build a reputation and a business, and get good at business skills and practice and showing up and sustainability, and learn all the things that you need to learn while getting paid to learn those things you learn, while offering value, because the value you offer in integrity is the most important part, because it's the karma that you're going to produce at the same time. And then you will pivot into other things. And I'm just saying 2 years for anything. It could be sooner for you. It could be much longer for you. I honestly used to think of everything in 5-year blocks at this point in my life, because it works for me. And so I don't know where I was going with that, but just do that.
Yeah. So yes, consistency is what it's all about, isn't it?
Consistency. Thank you.
And self-belief, I think it comes down to as well.
Very
believing
much
that
so.
you've got everything inside of you that you need. Yes, you can be learning more. Yes, you can be gathering more information. It's interesting because in human design, I'm a manifesting generator. So I'm very much shiny object syndrome. If something's not working for me, then I'm looking at the next thing to add on to that. Or the fact that I just love doing it all. and that I am multifaceted in how I learn and how I take in information, but then also my offerings as well, because I know that so many of them work. And it's interesting because I've seen, people in the industry, and it's almost like there's too many credentials that I feel overwhelmed. I'm like, I actually don't know what you're going to present to me.
Yeah.
And it's almost like you haven't found your thing because you've got too many things under your belt. And so I really checked in with myself to be like, well, is this how I want to present myself? If I'm thinking this about someone else, is someone else thinking this about me as well?
I know that a lot of people operate under the premise that it's better to be a jack of all trades than a master of none. But I really think it's just better to be a master of one trade at a time. Or, and like I've been mastering my ability to be an excellent vocal coach alongside with mastering my ability to do business. It's just that the business part of it, because I started with that later in life, is, I guess maybe one of the next things that I might do, because I love it and I'm very, very passionate about it. And I get asked about it all the time, because I have just so much information around it. But that was because I showed up, and I learned how to do it. Just don't underestimate the time and the patience that it takes to put into what you want to do, and don't switch and change too quickly is the biggest thing that I can say to everyone. Like, long-term goals, long-term plans, slow and steady does really win the race when it comes to business. Flitting and changing around is only... You're never going to get something to a point where you go like it's almost there, but it's not quite right. And then there's growth in that little adjustment pivot that needs to be done. And until you experience looking for the missing piece, you got to get it to a point where you look for the missing piece to get something to blow up. But if you're always going straight back to, like you said, manifesting generator, starting from ground zero again, and I'm a manifester, right? Not a manifesting generator, just a manifester. But if I hate, like, I love starting things, I hate doing them, and I hate finishing them, right? But I know through experience that if I keep going back to the beginning, I only, like, if you imagine me running 800 meters, and I do the first 100 meter and I'm like, nah, that wasn't fast enough, I'm gonna have to start again, or I'm not gonna get this whole 800 meters done in time. If I don't keep pushing past that 100 meters, I don't build up stamina and endurance and get my body into a physical place where in 6 months' time, it can do the whole 800 meters because it's used to just doing the sprint. Right? So it's the same with my singers when they get to points in their songs where they want to stop because their voice croaks and things like that. And I'm like, we can't just stop and start again and keep getting to the same point. We will go back and we will pick out just that point where you got stuck, and we will do it a million times. But don't stop when we're in a run through, because I also need you to understand the endurance, what takes you to get over the hill. Oh, wow, when I sing the whole thing, I need a lot more breath than what I expected. Or there's a lot more high notes than what I remember. I need to be more warmed up when I sing this song. You've got lessons in going through. So stop starting, because you're only getting really good at the first 100 meters. And then you've got the rest of the 700 that you've probably been in business for 5+ years and you've never even attempted the rest of the 700.
And that's mastery, isn't it?
Yeah.
Being able to push through those barriers. And that's, I think, where the self-work comes into it. And to me, that's where it bridges with spirituality. Because spirituality to me is my inwards awareness.
Yes.
And my connection to source, the earth, to the animal kingdom, and to humanity.
Yes.
And let's go there, because spirituality, I've done in season 1, there is actually an episode called What is Spirituality? Because it's thrown around so freaking much these days that I think people get really confused. And when I was growing up, I grew up Catholic and I went to church, and so my version of spirituality,
yeah, we both did.
My version of spirituality was religion indoctrination. And then when I started going, hang on a second, this isn't for me, this isn't serving me, this isn't aligned to what I want to believe or my values, I started questioning, a lot of the teachings. Then I kind of went, okay, well, what else is there? And then my version of spirituality in my early 20s became based around psychic readings. meditations, learning psychometry, which is basically learning how to connect to someone's energy and read for them through holding like a piece of their jewelry or their car keys or anything with their energy in it. And then it was around different healing modalities. So it's called the Melchizedek method, and it's an energetic thing. It's kind of along the lines of Reiki. And then I learned Reiki, and then it was all of these other things. And then it was divination tools, and it was learning how to use a pendulum. And then it was reading oracle cards. And then it was, different sort of frequencies and sound. And then it was plant medicine. And then all of these things, even though, yes, they can fall under spirituality, what I then started to notice in different communities is that it was very much pigeonholed. Like, if you want to be a spiritual person, I put that in inverted commas, then you have to be reading the tarot and using all these divination tools and doing all these certain things. And then when I started to unpack it, I'm like, that is still a version of indoctrination.
Yeah.
It is no different to what the Catholic Church was trying to teach and preach. It just looks different. It smells different because we use essential oils.
You use essential oils.
I use essential oils.
I do not. I don't get the essential oils thing.
On a side note, Deanna was in my car the other day, and I have an essential oil diffuser, USB one in my car. She's like, "What the fuck is that?" And I'm like,
honestly,
it's my diffuser. It smells really good. It keeps me calm when I'm driving with children in the car or in the traffic. And it's hilarious.
I can't. Like, who has a diffuser in their car? Like, ain't nobody got time for that. What are you doing?
It's me. I do, and I love it.
almost died. It was so funny.
And this is the thing, like, when we talk about like pigeonholing spiritual practices or spiritual tools, people think that, oh, you're spiritual because.
Mm-hmm.
And when I started to really break it down for myself, I started to realize that spirituality is anything that you want it to be.
Mm-hmm.
It can be anything that you want it to be. And because it is such a subjective perspective, no one can tell you what it is. It's like your version of good or my version of bad or right and wrong or hard and easy. Yeah. You might, you get up in the morning and you train and you do 1,000 burpees, and to you that's easy. To me, that's the hardest thing in the world. Yeah. But, if I've given birth to children, that might be hard to me, and you're like, oh, that's an absolute breeze, so it's completely subjective. And it's the same as spirituality. And I think there's so many people preaching their version of what spirituality is to them, and at the end of the day, I mean, it's our birthright to our absolute sovereignty to experience life and our oneness to self. And so whether you believe in God, source, the universe, or just an experience of life, it's just an awareness. And to me, that's what spirituality is. Yes, there's tools to help you get there. I truly believe that we've come into this world with human experience amnesia. That's what I call it, where we've come in. I mean, this is a little bit out there, but, we've signed a soul contract. We've come through with a purpose or a mission. And we're here to learn and grow, and our souls evolve. But when we accepted the mission, we came in with complete amnesia, and we were like, okay, get out there and just remember who you are. And that there's things that are dotted along our pathways to help us go through that remembrance journey. And for me, it has been the divination tools. It has been the synchronicities. It has been working with plant medicine. But that's not spirituality. The spirituality is my connection to self. It's my inner awareness. It's these tools that are on the journey with us that I feel like get caught up in spirituality. And thank you for coming to my TED Talk. You may speak now.
No, like because I pretty much agree with everything that you just said. Like spirituality to me is finding inner peace, connecting to my higher self, not the small self. The small self is the talk that goes on in your head all of the time. It's learning to separate personal preferences and understand that before you ever came here, the universe was in perfect synchronicity. Everything works in order. Everything was in place until humans started to mess with it. And so the more that we try and get in the way of our own, purpose, the further away from it we become.
Mm.
Whereas when we are in stillness and in a peace and in a place where we can remove our personal preference versus what's put in front of us, what's put in front of us is usually the way forward for us. It just doesn't always present in the way that we want it to. And the challenge is in being okay with the things that are uncomfortable. Right. And then we go into something and go, okay, well, this keeps coming at me and I really don't want to do it. But will I trust that this is from guidance, right? Rather than questioning myself that everything's based on trauma, it's not, right? A lot of the time when something is coming in front of you, it's a pathway to where you want to be, but it never, ever looks that way. And so the more that you can be in inner peace with yourself, the more that you can be happy alone and in stillness, the more that things can not go the way that you planned, and you can detach from the way that you planned being the only way for them to go, and for them to be successful, the more spiritual you become because you feel at home no matter where you are, no matter what's happening. There are a lot of tools and methods and modalities to get there. I'm a fan of many of them. I think the teachings are so important. The philosophy behind the teachings all a lot of the time have certain things that you're meant to do because they're teaching a self-discipline. And a self-discipline is just in showing up for something. If we stand for something, we don't fall for everything. So it's learning to stand for something and in turn standing up for yourself. You don't give your power away by worshiping it. You take the lessons and the metaphors that are created around spirituality and then you apply them to everything that you do in your life. And then when you're in that good place, it's really easy to approach new situations with detachment. You can't just go detach. It doesn't work that way in my experience. I'm not just saying all of this because I'm just giving opinions here. It's from personal experience. And in saying what I'm saying, you're not going to just get this message and then run with it now. You have to make the choice whether or not you want to go through that personal experience yourself to learn the lesson. I firmly believe we don't learn anything without experience, no matter how many times we've been told. It just doesn't work that way. So I guess that's my view on spirituality.
I love that. And one of the things that I took away from, I was in a medicine journey a few years ago, and one of the things that really just brought everything home was that not only connection to self, but connection to the earth, connection to the animal kingdom as well. And that's a big one for you and I.
It is.
So Deanna is you've been vegan for how many years?
8
years. Yeah. And it was through our friendship that my vegan journey evolved, I would say, because I got to ask you the questions. Deanna, even though she's been in the space of activism, you've run in like federal and state parliament for the Animal Justice Party, Voice for the Voiceless events. You're full of education as opposed to the judgy, pushy vegan, essentially. And let's dive there, because that, for me, veganism is part of my spirituality journey.
Yes.
And do you know what's really interesting is the day before we recorded this particular podcast, I put up a post, I put up a story on the In Life and Podcast Instagram and my own personal one as well, Jen Hamilton Official. And I asked people, like, what do you want to hear from Deanna and I? And it was around like business, spirituality, veganism, or controversial topics. And we had response for business, we had response for spirituality, and we had response for controversial topics, and basically nothing around veganism. So let's make it a fucking controversial topic. Why don't people want to hear it? Why don't people want to, like, what is it that triggers people around vegans talking about veganism? Because I get really passionate about this. And in the last couple of years, since becoming vegan for 2.5 years, I've stepped back a little bit from the angry vegan. I was never pushy vegan, but I was an angry, passionate vegan.
Of course.
And I had to take a step back and check in with myself and my own values and what it is that I wanted to experience. But the fact that not one person on, these platforms that we went out to wanted to hear about veganism screams cognitive dissonance to me. Like, they don't want to hear what vegans have to say because it's going to break down every belief system that they have created around food and lifestyle. So let's go there.
Circle of life and flow. Look, I did get response from my community about wanting to hear about veganism, but I guess the difference is that, like, even though I am probably one of the more spiritual people that you'll come across, I'm not necessarily part of the same communities and things like that, because in my brand, it's just not what I lead with. At the end of the day, it doesn't, not because I want to hide it. Clearly happy to have an open conversation about it, but it's just in the interest of keeping on brand so that I can stay on track with my purpose of helping as many people as possible. You have to be niche, and that's kind of part of what it is to be niche, right? So I guess the thing, if we want to get really spiritual about this, the universal law of non-interference has to do with the fact that the beings that, I guess, watch over the earth, the souls that are here looking over everything, guiding everything that is happening right now, or just monitoring, I won't say guiding, but monitoring everything that is happening right now, have a universal law of non-interference. And no matter how poorly Earth is going at the moment, I think we can all see it, that it's not quite on track to where it needs to be, they cannot interfere, right? Because it's part of the learning process to let humanity fail, if that's what it needs to be, so to speak, because it's not a failure, it's a lesson, but you can't learn it from observation. Sometimes you have to do it. Now, that's a whole big conversation. The point is that they can only guide, they can come in, they can send guides, but they can't interfere. Veganism is very much based on the same premise. Veganism is not a decision I make for myself. It's a decision I stop making for someone else. It's a decision I stop making to interfere, because if I interfere, that's karma for me. And it's not my job. It is not my job to dictate the terms of another being's life and their existence. As far as I'm concerned anyway, this far in my subjective reality, I feel that if there's one thing that I guess I advocate for anybody, it's freedom. Freedom of choice, freedom of speech, freedom of belief, right? For me, in freedom, not interfering with other animals or with animals, period, and other beings, is part of also echoing freedom on the other side. Now, some people go, but freedom is my choice to eat animals. Absolutely, it is your choice. But your choice does have an effect on something else. I personally feel better when I choose not to interfere with another being's existence and rather let that cycle play out its course. There are always going to be accidents. There is always going to be circle of life. We're not lions. We don't have the same teeth, nor do we have the same digestive system, right? So for me, at this point in my journey, I just don't feel like my vibrational energy can be high enough when I have something dead in my body. And so 15 years ago, I stopped eating meat. I became vegetarian. I was very mild at my vegetarianism, though, because from the beginning I started having soy milk and things like that. And back in the day when I turned vegan 8 years ago, nobody knew what I was talking about. People looked at me like I had two heads. And yes, we did have to eat before we went out. Like going to a restaurant, you had plain pasta and a side salad and maybe a bowl of chips if they weren't cooked in the wrong oil.
I love that perspective, because for me, it's very similar. But for me also, like, I remember the time I was sitting in a really beautiful medicine journey and feeling my connection to all things.
Yes.
And feeling my connection to animals. And for me, I understand, from a psychological perspective and having studied, hypnotherapy, psychotherapy, how our brains work, I understand cognitive dissonance. So cognitive dissonance is where it really is. Like it's where you know something, but you do another.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a lot of stuff to unpack with it. I mean, you and I are both Italians.
Mm-hmm.
We grew up, like, the family ate meat. It was the done thing. In fact, it was frowned upon to not eat meat. I remember when my sister went vegan many, many, many years ago, and my nonna wouldn't talk to her.
Yeah, wow.
It was rejection. It was rejection of the highest form in Italian families, to not eat what was put in front of you, and plenty of it.
Yeah.
And so for me, it was having to break down all of these barriers, getting really curious and really aligning to what my values are. And I do a lot of work around values and when I work with people. So the first step to growth is awareness.
Yes.
Once you know the things, you can't unknow the things.
Yes.
And the cognitive dissonance comes in when you know the thing and you go and do another thing.
Yes.
So if you genuinely believe that it is okay for an animal to experience pain and fear and to be slaughtered, and that is to be put on your plate for you to be enjoyed, then you're not going to have the same.
Yeah.
But if you hit a puppy, for example, on the road and you're like, oh my God, I can't believe I just ran over this puppy, and you're having a real conniption, yet you go and eat pork for dinner, what is the fucking difference? I'm not okay with that. And I had to get really clear on that for myself. I'm like, there is a gap between what my values are and how I'm acting when I was eating meat. I'm like, why am I okay with eating chicken for dinner, but getting riled up that in Asia they eat dog?
Yes.
What is the difference? And so this is where I had to really start to unpack things. And I started by watching documentaries. I watched Knives. Is it Forks Over Knives?
Forks Over Knives.
Forks Over Knives, Cowspiracy, Seaspiracy. And it wasn't actually until I was like a year into my veganism journey that I actually watched Dominion, because I knew how hard it was going to be to watch it. And I knew that I had to witness that to reinforce my decision constantly, because there are times you go out, like people make fun of you.
Yeah.
People don't invite you places. You get labeled, you get name called, you get shunned because you're making a decision that's actually like preserving the life of another being, but you're in the wrong. I mean, I've changed my friend circle since. My ex and I, we used to be known as the vegans. Oh, the vegans are here. The vegans are here. Oh, it's such a pain because, you know, we've got to have a different meal. We have to provide different types of food. And I mean, I kind of just got jack of it. It's probably why I come to Adelaide to hang out with my vegan friends more often.
There's a lot of us down there.
But this is the thing, like, this is what I'm talking about, the cognitive dissonance. I had it 100%. I had it because there was a big period of time where, especially having you in my circle, you were just this beautiful, bright light that spoke so openly about, you know, having a voice for the voiceless, that it was in my face, not rammed down my throat, but it was in my face enough for me to go, I need to look at this.
Yes.
And because you're someone that I've always held in such high regard and high respect, I'm like, well, whatever Deanna says, I want to listen to because I respect her so highly. And that's what we do with our friends that we respect. So tell me about your view of the world, Deanna. And I was like, oh, and then once I heard it, I'm like, huh, I can't unknow this.
Yeah.
And I now get to break down these massive internal barriers that I had to step into this. And then when I sat with medicine, I felt it all. And after that, I'm like, I cannot not only consume an animal product, because there's a very big difference between veganism and a plant-based diet, which I want to talk about as well.
Of course, yes.
So actually, let's go there, because you tell us the difference between veganism and plant-based. This is probably one of the biggest misconceptions that I feel in veganism.
So just, to give everybody context, obviously I went in a federal and a state election for the Animal Justice Party in South Australia, which is a party I was the deputy convener of as well. So knowing and understanding everything from a legislative perspective was obviously really important, but also at the same time, for 4 years, I was one of the co-chapter coordinators for Anonymous for the Voiceless in South Australia. And you've probably seen us before. It's the group that used to go out on the street with the white masks and the TV screens with the animal slaughterhouse footage on them. To spread awareness about the fact that slaughterhouses don't have glass walls for a reason. Now, this is such a big conversation because there's so many different questions that I know that people are already, or so many different things that people are saying, yeah, but. And if you said that question to me, I promise you I'd probably have a really good answer for you about it, because I used to every weekend, sometimes more than once in a weekend. And again, this is about just training the art of self-discipline. I was out on the streets talking to people for 3 hours at a time about this. And so there was a lot of questions, and whatever answers I didn't know, I'd go and research, and I'd come back and I'd find out, the answers behind it. And that really gave me this beautiful understanding that no matter how many outside of the box questions somebody threw at me, or how many reasons people told me that it doesn't have merit, veganism doesn't have merit, it doesn't stick, I was always able to find I guess, the reasons why it actually does. And I know that you can find evidence to support any argument if you want to. But when things are very, very simple, it's really easy to make this choice. Now, the difference between being plant-based and being vegan is that plant-based is obviously mainly refers to diet, right? It's someone who chooses to predominantly eat plant-based. You can be plant-based and still have the occasional like honey, or you can use, products in your bathroom that still have animal products in them. It means that, I guess 95+% of what you do is not harming animals, but everything else, like there's exceptions to the rules for you. That's what being plant-based is. If you're like, oh, but I eat, meat once a week or once a month or whatever, you're not really even plant-based. Really plant-based is animal byproducts that are kind of still making its way. But otherwise, from there, like, you're still a flexitarian, or realistically, you're just an omnivore. And that is what it is. There's nothing wrong with that. It's just, let's just call a spade, right? When it comes to being a vegan is somebody who goes as far as they can to remove any action that they could take or any purchase that they could make on a daily basis from harming animals as far as practical and possible. The definition of veganism, as far as practical and possible. What does that mean? It means that it extends to things like superannuation. Are you investing in a fund that makes its money by investing in the animal agriculture industry? If yes, as a vegan, that would not align with my values. So I would go to an ethical fund that does not contribute to animal agriculture, since it's the leading cause of destruction on the planet anyway, right? As a vegan, obviously I choose, you can go so far as to choosing products that you buy for your home, that you even go to the point where, and it's very difficult to do, but the glues and the color dyes and things are not made with animal products, right? And so, as you can see, it's very, very hard to be completely vegan. But I guess if there is a way to control whether or not an animal product is part of a purchase that you make or something that you do, that you need to do, then you make the decision regardless of convenience, even if it takes you the long way around. That's what a vegan is. If you're like, no, I just focus on the big things, but for convenience, I just do the other things, that's kind of what makes you more plant-based. That's kind of the distinction between the two.
Yeah, and for me, like my value of do no harm comes into it. So if we have a bug in the house, if we have a spider in the house, we're not actively trying to kill them. No. In fact, my kids pick them up with a piece of paper and put them outside on the plants, yes. Because even though, I mean, we don't love cockroaches, but the kids will like get a cup thing and like try and get them outside, because they have an understanding of the do no harm as well. And so, look, there are always going to be times where you can't get out of something. No. A lot of cars, come with leather seats, which is unavoidable. I remember asking you the question because I used to see things, I used to see questions on like vegan websites from an omnivore perspective, asking vegans, well, also what happens if you get bitten by a snake? Do you not have anti-venom? And at the end of the day, we're still here for our survival as well.
Yes.
So yes, if there comes a time where I was bitten by a snake and I required anti-venom to preserve my life, then I would take that option.
Yes.
Right? Would I necessarily go and buy a brand new car with leather seats? No. If I could change the seats, I could. If I was buying a second-hand car and it had leather seats,
it's different. Yes.
You find your okayness within that as well. Yes. And like you said, like there are couches that are made with certain glues and certain dyes, and not even the shop that you buy it from will know. No. So, and to me, I truly believe that veganism is a spectrum as well.
It is.
Because there's some people that wouldn't associate, first of all, with anyone who's not vegan, nor would they step foot in a place where there was an omni and a herbivore menu.
Yes.
We went out to dinner the other night with someone who's omnivore. We ate from the herbivore menu and everyone was happy. No one got stroppy that, the others weren't eating the same thing. And I went through a period of judgment of others when I first stepped into veganism because I could see my perspective. Why can't you see my perspective?
Mm-hmm.
Let me educate you from an angry vegan. And then when I started to step back and realize, in my view of the world, if I get to be right, then in their view of the world, they get to be right.
Yeah.
And even though I can share things and become a voice for this and share from a place of love, actually I'm not here to completely influence anyone's decision. I truly want them to come from a place where they just know what they're doing.
And I think that it's very like, obviously a big part of, you know, my job was to influence people's decisions. And I guess the biggest thing is that regardless of where you think you might sit on the spectrum, be educated. Ignorance is always bliss, you know, but there are so many things that we are ignorantly contributing to in this world that really do actually affect our balance, our inner peace, our spirituality, our karma. And so being ignorantly unaware, when you're aware that it's there, but you don't want to, I can't watch Dominion, you know, and go to watchdominion.com if you want to know what we're talking about. I can't see that slaughterhouse footage. It's too traumatizing. If it's too traumatizing for your eyes, it's way too traumatizing for your plate, you know. And be educated about what you are actively contributing to. You cannot say, oh, but I'm at peace with my decisions, if you don't actually know what's behind it. I hate to call everybody's bluff on that, but it's just the truth. I was the type of activist that went to slaughterhouses, stopped trucks, did vigils. I've gone into public places holding the carcasses of dead animals to spread awareness about what happened to them. I've seen it, and I understand it. Now, I'm not saying, because I always get asked this question, oh, but if you were stranded on a deserted island, would you not eat an animal to survive? I probably would in that situation. What I'm saying is that right now in 2023, when all it takes is walking down a different aisle at the supermarket or choosing a different item at the menu, what are you still doing? Contributing to mass destruction of animals. What are you still doing? It's not necessary at any point in time. And if it is necessary, you'll make that decision with discernment.
And I don't know of anyone, nor have I seen anything in, you know, the media where anyone has been stranded on a deserted island for long either.
No.
I wouldn't mind it for a couple of days.
Yeah.
Like, you know, like maybe an island in the South Pacific or something, you know, with maybe like a guy named Sven that just fans me off and brings me cocktails. Like, is that?
Let's go there now.
Let's do that. We'll see you in the Maldives.
Yeah.
I really want to just bring forward a lot of questions because I know that a lot of people have questions around things, and let's break down some of the stigma around this. So let's talk about teeth, because people are like, but we're designed to eat meat with our canines. Break that down for us.
Okay. So again, I don't really need to break it down, right? You just need to go to Google and you need to look at the difference between a carnivore's teeth and a herbivore's teeth. Our teeth are the same as herbivores, not even the same as omnivores, because our incisors aren't big enough, right? They're literally the same as herbivores. And so when it comes to teeth, like, just because we can break it down, well, you can't. Think about it like this. A carnivore's teeth are designed to kill an animal and rip it apart, flesh, skin, hair, teeth, nails, you name it, rip it to shreds and eat the raw meat, because their digestive system is much smaller than ours. They don't need it to be cooked, to be broken down, to eat it. We need to go through this process of killing the animal, skinning the animal, cooking the meat, making sure that it's all, you know, okay, digesting it, etc., etc. And it's a much longer process for us in our bodies, because it's not like we can't survive on meat. It's just, if you look back through history, there were times where people used animals to survive, but most of the time they didn't. It was one of the things that only the elites ate. It wasn't affordable to the everyday person. And people might argue, but we ate meat and that's how we evolved. Well, actually, no. We needed to, at that point in time, have the knowledge and, I guess, the smarts to be able to realize how to fashion a weapon to kill the animal, how to skin the animal, how to cook the animal. We didn't develop that awareness because we were carnivores and we could just rip into the flesh and do it, because we couldn't. We developed that awareness because before that point in time, we lived off the fruits of the earth and what was provided for us as well. Now, I'm opening a whole can of worms here, and just remember, this is like one tiny portion of the conversation. But if you look at the way that we are, I'm not saying that we can't eat meat. I'm just saying that we're not, no, necessarily. If you look at us from the way that we're designed, and if you look at the blue zones in the earth and the way that those people eat, it's plant-based with a tiny little bit of meat, if that at all, because of the way that our bodies are optimized to process food.
One of the things that you mentioned was digestion, because we don't have the enzymes to break it down. It has to be cooked. And one of the biggest things I learned through this process as well is that you don't just eat obviously raw meat, but also everything's got flavor added to it.
Yes.
So you can have flavor added to something and people know, oh, that's barbecue chicken. So you get your chicken from Collis or Woolies and it's just got all the flavoring on it. It would be very, very boring if it didn't have that.
Well, protein on its own doesn't actually possess flavor.
Yeah.
Our tongues are only designed to taste salt, sugar, and fat, right? There is fat in the meat that can give it flavor. But also when it comes to a plant-based protein, you can add the same amounts of salt, sugars, and fats, and you can get a very similar taste. What's different is texture. Texture is very hard to imitate, but in terms of taste, you can get very, very close.
Yeah. Let's talk about why some vegans then choose to have mock meats, which is sometimes full of shit.
Yeah.
And then there's the argument, like, why wouldn't you just eat the animal where it's just the animal?
Yeah, so the difference between the activism community and the spiritual community is that activists are there going, I'm taking myself being a priority out of the mix of this right now. And I'm not going vegan because I don't like the taste of meat. I'm going vegan because it's the right thing to do. And so for me at this point in time, I'm okay with choosing to eat junk food because I like the taste of it. And I don't want to change the way that I was eating before, but I don't want to contribute to the unnecessary slaughtering and suffering of innocent animals. So this is what I'm eating. So there's a market for it. It's plain and simple. I personally, when I went vegan, mock meats didn't come out until about 4 years after. It was about 2018, 2019 that mock meats were a thing. Prior to that point in time, there was literally TVP, which is textured vegetable protein. There was tofu. And that was the only replacements. Oh, and seitan, if you made it at home. They didn't used to sell that, but you could make it from wheat. I never did because I wasn't much of it. And so I just ate tofu and legumes, and I still eat that today. And I'm not a big one to go and buy mock meats and eat them. It doesn't mean that when I'm out, I won't try them now because they're there and they're available. But most vegans still love the taste of what's going on. So the products are there because they're just making a decision to start with removing themselves from the suffering and then worry about the health afterwards.
Yeah. And one of the things that I experienced when I came down to see you in Adelaide earlier this year, I went down to Fringe Festival, and Adelaide, I didn't realize how incredible Adelaide is for vegan food. It's quite hard here where I am in Brisbane. But in Adelaide, they had these food trucks, and I remember there was this tofu pork belly style thing, and it was honestly like the texture, like there was 3 layers of tofu all done different ways. I used to be a fan of pork belly before I actually understood
What
pork.
it was. Yeah.
And I had it and I was like, this is incredible. There are so many things. Like there's this place at South Bank, it's a Greek restaurant, and they use a mock lamb, and it's got the same texture of like a slow cooked lamb in this like beautiful marinade stuff. Why wouldn't I have it? And it is like it's textured. I think it's just a TVP thing, or it's like a pea protein or something. My body can handle that. My body can break that down. When I was a meat eater, without going sort of too deep, you can notice by the smells of you or how it sits in your gut, it's rotting in there.
Yeah.
And I've noticed like I smell and taste better as a vegan. And there's been reports of that.
There's usually evidence to back it.
There really is. There really is. So ladies, if you're out there and you want to taste better for your man, go vegan. Guys, if you're out there and you're like, oh, I wish he tasted a bit sweeter, get her to go vegan. That's a new slogan.
Look, yeah, vegans taste better was massive in the activism community as a joke, and everyone was like, we should really get. I think there are T-shirts that actually say it.
I need one.
Which is
I need that,
because obviously it's more alkaline. At the end of the day, like it's less acidity going into your body, and the digestive system it's a lot quicker because we have a large and a small intestine, whereas a carnivore only has a large intestine, and so we digest things a lot slower. And so by the time they do hit our bowels, a lot of the time they have fermented.
Yes, and that's the smell.
And that's the most
smell.
pleasant of experience. But I guess the other thing I just wanted to touch on before we, wrap up this part of the conversation, because I know that it's massive with the spiritual community, and I do have a lot of friends in the spiritual community as well. And again, like totally just respecting everybody's process, just really reaching out to say, be a little bit more educated because you might be surprised by what you find out. I certainly was. The biggest thing everyone says to me, and a lot of it happens up here in Queensland, is, oh, but I buy organic.
Oh, but it's ethical. It's ethical
and it's organic.
Ethically slaughtered. Yeah.
And I just want to say that organic talks about the way it's fed, not the way it's slaughtered. And at the end of the day, because I was in politics for this specific matters, I know exactly what's legislation and what's guidelines. Now, legislation is law. Guidelines are just recommendations that the government made for ethical slaughter of animals based on absolutely no, I guess, truth whatsoever, because the words humane slaughter in themselves are an oxymoron.
Mm-hmm.
Humane is to be compassionate and benevolent. Slaughter is to kill something. You can't compassionately take away another being's life without its choice. But just understand that if you buy from an organic farm, it doesn't mean it doesn't go to the exact same slaughterhouse. And at the end of the day, the recommendations and guidelines, which are not monitored, because still at this point in time, we have not been able to pass legislation for CCTV footage to be put in slaughterhouses, then animals get stunned in the head with a stun gun first. Well, most of them, it depends. We're talking about lamb, like sheeps and cows, and then they get their neck slit, and then they get hung upside down and the blood drains out. It takes half an hour to an hour. If the stunning doesn't work, it has about a 20 to 30% chance of efficacy. It doesn't work most of the time, then they just feel the full force and effect of cutting the neck, because when a cow can smell blood of its peers, it thrashes around, right? And it's very hard to be accurate to get the stun gun in the right place. Firstly, pigs, the most humane way to slaughter them in Australia is to lower them in a gas chamber and let them burn from the inside out, right? And when it comes to chickens, we hang them upside down, we chop off their heads, we dunk them into boiling water, and the process begins. And obviously, baby boy chicks, for example, they're a waste product of the industry. The minute that they're hatched, they go on a conveyor belt straight into a macerator and ground up alive to make fertilizer. So just understand that even organic, humane organic slaughter, RSPCA approved, any other label you want to put into it, those are the guidelines. Go and look me up. You'll find that I'm not making this shit up.
Mm-hmm. And one of the biggest things for me is energetics, because for me, especially in my spirituality journey, that we've spoken about, for me, the energy of putting into my body that of absolute fear and terror before it died, like our cells hold energy.
Of course they do.
And so when we're putting dead things in, we feel dead, but we're also bringing in all of that fear that's like literally encoded into their cells.
Yep.
All of that terror, all of the like those last moments of like squealing and like begging for life before they're in the slaughterhouse, that energy experience is going to be encoded in their cells.
Of course.
And that's what you're ingesting. And one of the biggest things for me since being vegan is not only how amazing I feel from a health perspective. I've had a couple of head colds in the last few years. So my health has been incredible. My skin is great. My hair is great. My nails are great. Like I'm not lacking anything, but I just feel good.
Yeah.
Like not only that, like my guts feel light.
Yes.
As well. I've I've noticed such a big difference in my digestion as well. Like I process things in such a fast and easier way.
Mm-hmm.
And I just feel overall like I'm making a difference here as well, because as part of the work that I do, I want to create impact. I want to create legacy. I want to create change in this world.
Mm-hmm.
And this is a way to support that as well. And so it's not like getting beyond my own self and realizing, I call this my shake method, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I look at self, I look at humanity, I look at the animal kingdom, and I look at the earth. And every decision that I make comes back to my shake method. How is it serving me? How is it serving humanity? How is it serving the animal kingdom? How is it serving the earth? How am I creating positive impact for my children and following generations? How can I make better informed choices so that we can absolutely thrive on this earth and the earth can thrive with us here, because we've made such a fucking mess of her. Well, absolute fucking mess.
Every decision either moves us towards or away from evolution at the end of the day. And so just because we've always done something doesn't make it right. Understand that that's actually the biggest part of our spiritual journey of all, is understanding the difference between indoctrination and making new choices based on information that you learn along the way.
Yeah. What a powerful chat. Thank you for this. I have one last question before we wrap up.
Go for it.
Deanna Carbone.
Yes.
What is the meaning of life?
Ooh. When I find out, I'll let you know. I think whatever it is to you at this point in time is the meaning of life, and then tomorrow it could be different, and then the next day after that it could be different as well. Some souls are on this journey right now for a rest. Some souls are on this journey right now for growth. You know what in your heart, what it is for you, and the only way that you can uncover it is sitting in silence with yourself, meditation, medicine, anything that helps support your journey, and getting used to listening to the voice that's within at the end of the day. So I guess the meaning of life is figure it out for you.
What is it for you?
The meaning of life for me is understanding my existence within this ecosystem. Understanding that I'm just not an individual. Although I am an individual organism, I function as part of a pack. And this pack is on planet Earth, and it's humanity, and that's the choice that I have made as this organism right now to be in this human existence in this body. And I know that I'm here to do something good and something powerful to help not only my evolution, but the evolution of all souls through this very incredible point in time. But I also understand that when it comes to the universe and the multiverse, that we're one little part of a much bigger picture that I have no ability to comprehend whatsoever, because humans have the inability to comprehend infinity. But I know that I'm here to do a job, and I'm going to check in with myself every single day and just make sure that it feels like I'm doing whatever that is, even though most of the time I'm just stabbing in the dark like everybody else.
Good answer. I love that. I love that for you.
I love that for you. Yes.
Well, thank you so much to everyone that has made it to the end with us. I know it's been a long episode, but full of so much wisdom and gold nuggets. I really, really love this. Deanna Carbone, thank you for being on the Enlighten podcast.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you so much for joining me for this episode. I hope you love the Enlighten podcast, and the biggest compliment you can give me is subscribing to this podcast, sharing it, and leaving a rating and review. Feel free to follow me on Instagram. My handle is @JenHamiltonOfficial, and the podcast handle is enlightened_podcast. You can also find the video version on YouTube on my channel. Just search Enlighten, and don't forget to hit subscribe. Have a beautiful day and enjoy living the enlightened journey of life.